All right, guys, how's everybody doing? Just got back from the games, and please forgive me because I'm a little under the weather. The weather is pretty dry up there. The air is pretty dry, and every year I come back a little sick from Madison, like the allergies and just the change in humidity does me in pretty gnarly. So bear with me in regards to that. I'm gonna try my best to do more regular videos for all of us, just to kind of get the thoughts out of my head and to try to stay more engaged with everybody. Um, Most of you guys know, but for those of you who do not, I took a full-time position with a company called Loud and Live as the competition manager for all of their major events. Loud and Live is predominantly a marketing agency, but they have a sports division, and that sports division is mostly focused on CrossFit, a few other things, but it's mostly CrossFit. And we own the rights to 5 of the major sanctioned events. So that's Wadapalooza, Granite Games, West Coast Classic, the new event in Mexico, the new event in Madrid. So my role is everything competition related, as far as heat times and schedules and workouts and qualifiers and standards and rule books and managing judges and all staff management related to anything competition on the floor. That's what my brand new full-time job is. I'm still very much involved with Soul and Team Soul on every level, but I am removed from the day-to-day of that. And I'm hopeful that this new position is going to help our team and our gym grow even more. It's putting more trust in people like my brother, Sean, Lewis, and the rest of our program to continue growing it, and in hopes that with what I'm learning at my new job will put us in an even better position. So I'm going to do more stuff like this to try to stay more engaged with you guys on a regular basis. So in this, I'm going to follow up with this video next week. I'm going to talk more about the Open. I know we had a lot of questions about the Open and how we're planning on preparing from a competitive standpoint and also as a gym. We'll do like more formal, buttoned up, produced, nice, cool videos. But I'm kind of excited to just do these like really laid back videos so I can just speak very openly with everyone and share my thoughts. So I want to start by talking about the sanctional season. Overall, I think it was very positive. I know that there are a lot of tough changes for a lot of people who had always focused on competing at regionals. But I am very positive about the sanctionals, not just because that's the company that I work for, Loud and Live, who is heavily involved in some of those larger events, but I think it creates more opportunities for some people to compete. And I think it's overall much better for the sport. If you look at what many of these sanctional events look like in comparison to regionals, they are better events. Regionals was essentially a very vanilla, toned down CrossFit competition that was well standardized in a convention center. That's really as simple as it was. It was not a festival, it was not an event, it was not a gathering. There was not really a good platform for people to connect and share ideas, to build relationships, and that didn't exist at regionals. I think it was good for athletes individually in regards to like having something that's a bit more standardized than we're presented with now. However, I'm very positive about the direction of the sanctionals, and keep in mind, at first I was not, and I even had in a much smaller role, but I was already employed by Loud and Live when many of these changes happened. And at first I was not. And after traveling around, seeing more of the competitions and seeing the hard work that people are putting into these events, and starting to see more of what Greg Glassman and Dave Castro's vision may have been, I think that it's going to pan out the right way and help the sport grow tremendously. Um, I think as we move forward into the sanctional season, there's more order to our season, which is going to be great going into next year. We are a program that we we plan a lot. All of our programming design is based on peaking for certain events and preparing for certain events. That has always been paramount for us. And last year, to be totally transparent, really fucked us up in a lot of ways. It threw us for a curveball, and we were not prepared for that. And some of our results reflect that, to be totally honest with everybody. So next year, the schedule's already been posted, and we're very excited for it. Our program will reflect this. We are going to peak and prepare for sanctioned events and online qualifiers. Which ones those will be, we will make a post shortly, kind of laying out our full season. But for those of you guys who have been asking, that's kind of the gist of what our season is going to reflect and look like. I still do think that the sanctionals are very pro elite. It still favors people with the most money. It favors people with a flexible schedule. It favors people who have the ability and desire to travel, not always who are the most fit. And if you know about this sport, you know that it's the people who are the most fit are not always the people who have the most social media following and the most sponsorships, etc. So that's something that I'm not thrilled about. I'm not a very heavy social media guy. So it's always broken my heart to see that people that are willing to show themselves in a certain light get more play on social media and from sponsorships than people who, in my opinion, deserve it more, who are the most talented and work the hardest. Nonetheless, there's still plenty of opportunities for people. So I'm going to move into some of my reflections for the games. On the games. I'm going to start by talking about the national champions. I think that the national champions are very good for the growth of the sport of fitness. I don't think we're going to see that positive impact for quite a few years. And the whole idea is this. It is actually attainable to become a national champion if you have status in some of those countries that have a representative affiliate. It is not very attainable for most people to be at the CrossFit Games in that top 20 heat. So to be on the level of Matt Fraser, Noah Olson, BKG, Scott Panchik, Jacob Heppner, Will Morad, Travis Mayer, et cetera, et cetera. I know I'm only speaking of the men. However, regardless, that is not attainable for most people. It is attainable to be at the CrossFit Games representing your country as a national champion. And that is the intention behind rolling this out, to help the sport grow globally. And their hope is that several years down the road, you will start to see more viable competitors from those countries that they start to build. Because what starts to happen is you see folks in your country that they say, shit, I can actually reach that. I can do that. I can reach my goal. I can beat him. I can beat her and become the national champion for that year and be represented at the CrossFit Games. Now, does that mean that they're going to succeed in the first few years and move past these brand new cuts if they keep them around? Not likely. However, again, the concept is several years down the road, they will. So I think it's positive. I will be honest, I'm not a fan of those massive cuts in regards to national champions, but I understand that they are a vital part of I mean, if you're going to invite that many people out there, you got to do something. I hated, and it's not just because of the 3 people that I coached at the games this year. I hated the vibe back there after that first event. There was a lot of tears. It was very quiet. It was a dark place, and sometimes the warm-up area of the CrossFit Games is like that, but not often. And it was just an overwhelming amount of darkness, in my opinion, especially when they rallied them all together and they announced the cuts and they told the coaches to sit next to their athletes and cut off their coaches' wristbands. It was kind of like the fucking walk of shame. That was in poor taste, in my opinion, and I'm not a fan of how they did that. Now, once again, I understand that. I do think that we are in need of a better system and a better filter before having these folks who are proudly representing their country go out to the CrossFit Games to represent. What does that mean? You have 28 sanctioned events. Maybe they position one of the sanctioned events with running an actual national championship, where you send all of those folks who are national champions to this event. Use the Granite Games as an example. Let's say the Granite Games hosts the national champions. All of those national champions from the Open go to the Granite Games, compete in 3-4 days of competition, prove that they do actually have what it takes to keep up with CrossFit Games athletes. And then you send the top 5 men and women to the CrossFit Games, and then you don't have to send people home after running a 400 meter and doing a couple rope climbs. I've been involved in the sport long enough and trying to raise funds and coaching people over and over and over who don't get a lot of sponsorship love. And I know what it's like to save money and ask money and run events and sell shirts and hustle your fucking ass off to be represented there and to be sent home after one event. It just doesn't fare well for me. But I do understand it. And what I will say, honestly, that's sport. That's how you need thick skin to compete on that level. It's just that delicate balance where they're lowering the barrier of entry so much, but then they're raising the expectation at the same time, that I don't think that they've found that sweet spot. Let's move on to games programming. I think this year's games was fucking great in regards to the programming. I think the tests were good and well-rounded if you consider the entire body of programming. Now, I'm not talking about cuts. I'm not talking about where those workouts were placed. I think the tests were fair and the tests were well-rounded. I really liked not having any events to think about or prepare or stress about at all. It really levels the playing field. It takes so much anxiety from the athlete and the coach, the coach-athlete relationship. There's definitely another level of anxiety, but knowing that the playing field is so fair across the board that no one really knows, it kind of breaks up that very typical anxious coach-athlete relationship prior to your events, because really you're just philosophizing and throwing shit to the wall. You're just throwing shit out there and hoping that it sticks based on how the coach knows him or her. There's really no say if the plan that you put together works and makes sense. Warming up is tough and preparation is tough, but I definitely like not knowing the workouts beforehand, believe it or not. On the not so positive side, I think there was too much running. There's 3 running events, especially before those cuts. I think there was a lot of pulling gymnastics, and I didn't like not seeing quite enough awkward objects and strongman. Now, that doesn't really matter. I make that statement based on the previous years of what the CrossFit Games has given us. I was talking to a close friend of mine about this year's programming and this year's format. And, we make these judgments and these statements based off of the system and the model that we've become comfortable with. And when I tell a seasoned coach, what is a CrossFit Games? What's the look and feel of the CrossFit Games? You know what that is. And obviously, from the whole, based on the whole season, even the Open, everything has changed. So to say, for me to make these statements, I'm really basing them on my comfort zone of what my relationship with the CrossFit Games has been previously. And obviously this season has showed us that we all need to adapt in many ways more than one. Let's move on to the very controversial cuts that they made. So for those of you guys who don't know, they made massive cuts at the CrossFit Games all week long. So starting with the very first event was a run, rope climbs, and slightly heavier than average squat snatches. So right when they did that, they made a massive cut, which unfortunately sent many of the national champions and also some people who qualified through the open home. And as events went on, they made more and more and more cuts. Like I said before, if that is going to be the format where they want to encourage and have so many athletes come out and compete, and they're going to lower that barrier of entry for those folks so much, you have to have the cuts. There's really no other way. I think that they did a phenomenal job at designing and planning a first event with such mass participation. The prospect of 50 fucking people doing a workout at once at the CrossFit Games is incredibly overwhelming to even think about. Now, I plan events, so I'm thinking about it from that perspective, but from a fan perspective, from an athlete perspective, from a coaching perspective, the idea of that is very overwhelming. And I think they crushed it. I think it was a great workout. It was programmed well. I think that the how they planned it out on the field was awesome. I have no beefs, no complaints with that at all. I think it was a very well-programmed event, considering that they needed something with mass participation in it. And I was also very happy to see that it was a CrossFit workout. Everyone was very scared that there was going to be another marathon row, a triathlon, a 10K run, a big long ruck, something like that would be too specialized before they would make a cut. So I'm very happy to see that they did a fucking dope CrossFit workout before they started to make cuts. Now, in regards to the cuts later on throughout the week, as you went into the weekend, I think that the top 10 that we saw at this year's CrossFit Games were purely a reflection on where those cuts were placed, especially the last cut. If those cuts were adjusted and moved an event or two, you would see a completely different top 10. Now, the job of the CrossFit Games is to crown the fittest man and woman alive. And I think Justin and Dave did that. They checked that box. They fucking did their job really well. Because there is, there may be some opinions on like the issue that Matt had with the bag and if he should have been disqualified. And I know that there's people who favor other athletes out there and think that they deserve that spot. However, in large part, there's very little debate that Matt Fraser and Tia Claire Toomey are the two fittest human beings on the planet, and they've been so for quite some time. Now, for the rest of the field, I think it would be completely different. And but that's really not the intention of the CrossFit Games. The CrossFit Games are not trying to find the top 3 fittest people on earth. They're not trying to find the top 10 or the top 20. They're trying to find and crown the fittest for that year, and they did their job. Going back to those cuts, I also don't think that it's wise to place cuts after such specialized events. For example, the sprint. The sprint was super short. It's from a fan perspective, watching a sprint and seeing some like perennial games athletes get cut after that, it's kind of lackluster. So from a sporting perspective, I did not enjoy watching that at all. And also, like, I think you need to, it's the CrossFit Games. I think you need to test CrossFit more prior to doing that. Especially, like, if you consider the order of events, they made that massive 50% cut, which left you with 10 men and 10 women before the heaviest event of the whole week, which was that 1 rep max clean kind of weightlifting meet format thing that they did. Didn't test anything heavy before then. So as a result, on the women's side, I believe you had 5 of the top 10 women that couldn't even touch the first bar. I don't think that they tested strength enough prior to that event. You should have earned your way to that event and been able to prove that that was a weight that you could potentially handle. That doesn't mean you had to test the 1 rep max clean. That doesn't mean that you had to do a heavy complex, but there should have been something else heavy, and in my opinion, more CrossFit prior to making that massive cut. Now, I will say that it was fun for media, it was fun for drama, and this was the first year that Greg Glassman allowed outside media to come into the CrossFit Games. So they're very heavy on that right now, and I think that this format was very positive considering that. For some people, we love that, and for some people, that's kind of an annoyance to us. Like me personally, I don't watch the CrossFit Games for that kind of drama. I really want to see people be pushed hard. Anyways, more to that, I don't think there's a need to make such massive cuts so early on, like Saturday midday, especially before there's more CrossFit that needs to be tested. Another tough thing is when you have such a small pool of athletes, for example, that just having 10 spots, normally in like specialized events like that clean format that they did, you rely on less well-rounded people that are sitting in the 20s, sitting in the 30s, or wherever it is, even fucking 15 of them, to take points and win events for people that are maybe more well-rounded. I'll give you an example. If you would have left Travis Mayer in there, Travis would have beaten people like Noah, probably would have beaten people like BKG in that clean event, which would shift points around and make things honestly more exciting. And that I think is a huge part. Consider like the swim events. You have someone on the women's side, someone like a Sam Briggs. You rely on someone like Sam Briggs to come up and shake up the leaderboard a little bit on the endurance events because she's going to drop the heavier events. That's a necessary part in, like, if you look at the entire scoring and testing body of the CrossFit Games. Otherwise, when you just have 10, the leaderboard really gets stuck in place. And then what you see is like those small races only, which was very exciting. I have to admit, it was very exciting to watch the Noah Matt Frazier thing, but that's really what it turns into. It's like these two guys at the top, these two guys in the middle, these two people in the bottom, and that's really the format that you force to create when you have such limited spots. The teams, the same thing. When you have so few teams, the leaderboard gets locked into place and there's not a ton of movement, and that's not very exciting. There's like a race between second and third, and that was it, Now, that doesn't take anything away from someone like Rich Froning. Obviously, that team would have dominated no matter what, but everything else that you saw play out is in large part due to the cuts and to that format. I got two more points to touch on: the Masters and the age group. Well, the age group division. So that would be all the Masters and all the teens. I think the programming was dope. It was very spot on. I saw a lot of people in our group, and I got some messages being very concerned with how they felt that CrossFit Games de-emphasized, and to be honest with you, in the press conference, straight up insulted the age groups. And yeah, that's true. And that is unfortunate. I will say that the age groups have really never gotten a lot of love from CrossFit. Some people ask me, do you think that the age groups will continue to be there? And I absolutely think they will, because I know that they will raise hell if CrossFit makes a change like that. But it is, and that would not go well for CrossFit, in my opinion. But that is how it is, man. CrossFit is a very unique beast where they own the rights to the name of their sport, and they also own the rights to their, the end of their. They own everything, and they can make this whatever decision they want. There's not like a board in place, and there's not a system of checks and balances. They can make whatever decision that they want. And the rest of us, if we love that sport and we want to be involved, we just have to adapt to that sport. So, most of the time, it doesn't really do us any good to like fucking complain about these things because that's just how it is. What I do think is interesting though with all the age group stuff is now I feel like the sanctioned events have a tremendous opportunity to step up a little bit and do something for that community that is honestly not being well served. There was no media coverage. I don't think there's been much in the past, anyways. So I don't think that's a huge difference. But I think in a scenario like this, there's always opportunities, like I said, and it's time that many of these other events step their game up to provide a platform for those folks to compete. Overall, if I had to give the games a rating, I would give it a B minus this year. Would be like my grade for the games. Like I said before, their number one job is to crown the fittest man and woman alive, and that absolutely happened in every way, shape, or form. I don't think HQ is going to change much for next year. I know next year is technically year 2 with all these changes. However, they do have their shit together more now than they did when they made the changes. So a lot of us are kind of looking at this as the first real year of all the major changes, just because you can plan a little better. So I think this year will reveal a lot more, and I think it'll be pretty much the same. There's some rumors of sanctionals kind of getting together and building some kind of system. There's a lot of stuff out there, but I do think for the most part, for everyone's ability to plan what their training year will look like, what they can expect, their travels, whether you're a spectator of the sport, you want to compete in scaled divisions, etc. I think that the format of this year is already set in place, and I don't see many changes that are going to be announced after the games. I do think that they will, I'm hopeful that they will give the sanctioned events a little bit more control so that we can kind of create, maybe our own format a little bit and do things for some of the rest of the community that is a bit underserved. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm going to do more of these. I'm going to try my best to do them weekly. They will be shorter. I see now that I've been ranting for quite some time. It's almost a 30-minute video. But I hope you enjoyed it. You can post any questions or your thoughts, and we can keep this dialogue going. Thanks a lot. Peace.